This is Josh Einstein from SaveJersey.com, New Jersey's #1 conservative site for news and views affecting the Garden State. Joining us today, we have the pleasure of State Senator and NJ GOP nominee for U.S. Senate, Joe Kyrillos. Thank you so much for joining us today, Senator.
Josh, thank you. Great to be on with you. I appreciate it.
So I guess our first question is really, about your background. How did you first get involved in politics?
Well, I've served in the legislature a long time. I was elected first to the state assembly, then to the state senate after a couple terms in the House, and I've been there for 20 years. I worked in the Reagan administration as a young guy in my middle 20s. First at the Reagan-Bush headquarters in 1984, and then for the Interior Secretary in 85 and 86. And so I've had a great public life, and here I am running for the U.S. Senate.
Oh, it's terrific. So I guess our follow-up is, what did you do, or what are some of your proudest accomplishments in your time in the state senate and in the assembly?
Well, listen, I'm proud of the fact that I've served for a long time, and a long time honorably, and I've served in the majority, probably half my time, and the minority, which is much more frustrating for the second half. But along the way, I've chaired committees. I served as the majority conference leader. I served, as you know, simultaneously as the Republican state chairman, early part of the last decade, and I was Mitt Romney's chairman 4 years ago when he ran for president the first time. And of course, a great public achievement, one I'm very proud of, is to have served as the state chairman for Chris Christie's successful campaign in 2009. Served as member of the transition team, as the liaison to all of its subcommittees, and of course now working side by side with him to try to make the state better, more competitive. I've focused as much as possible on jobs, on the economy, on our important economic development incentive programs, and the whole economic delivery apparatus to make our state more prosperous, and along the way try to make the tax climate, the regulatory climate, the business climate as competitive as possible.
Very, very good. So before you mentioned, I believe that you worked for a little bit in the Reagan administration. I guess, going back in time, who would you say are your political role models? Well,
listen, I love serving Ronald Reagan and his administration. A lot of people talk about President Reagan, and many people that are helping me, supporting me, are talking about my race today, talk about Ronald Reagan when they were born after he was president, and very few people had the privilege of actually working in his administration. And so obviously I look up to him. I look up to both President Bush's and Governor Christie, and there's a lot of people I admire. There's people that I've served with in the legislature that I admire and respect. I don't have any particular heroes per se. The Star-Ledger asked me recently, who are your heroes, and you can't name Ronald Reagan and you can't name Jesus Christ. And I said, well, listen, I respect and admire a lot of people, my parents included, that I've never been a hero worshiper. I respect and admire a lot of people that help and serve our country and humanity at large.
Well, it's quite a high bar, Ronald Reagan and Jesus Christ can't select either one of them.
They were specifically barred from the list, but they would be.
I'm sure Reagan would be flattered to be, on that same list. So getting into the nitty-gritty, I know our readers can go to your website and find out more in-depth about your economic plans. But just in case, they're listening right now and maybe in the hustle-bustle of everyday life, they don't get to your website, what are the particulars of your plans that turn the economy around?
Well, I think you just said people can go to the website, and I hope they do, at joekyrillos.com. Look at my jobs plan. I spent a lot of time putting it together, visited a lot of businesses, small and medium and large, heard from business leaders of all stripes, talked to economists, and there are really 7 basic planks to my jobs plan, but they all aim to do the same thing: create economic growth by giving job creators certainty and a better climate. We need jobs. My plan creates them by restoring responsibility, fiscal responsibility, reforming the tax code, lowering tax rates, reducing really horrible, burdensome regulations that stifle progress, stifle business leadership, and restore the country as a home of innovation. So, I want to establish a climate where we can really build a competitive workforce, get the economy going again, put forth some solutions to the country's energy challenges, and bring prosperity back again. We can't afford the course that Bob Menendez is on. He votes the wrong way. He advocates the wrong way. All the initiatives that he would promote are wrong for the economy of New Jersey, and it is so maddening that we have 43 straight months now, 8% plus unemployment. I'm outraged. I can't believe the country at large isn't rising up en masse to demand new people that'll make the right decisions. Last Friday, the jobs numbers came out, and they're horrible. They're horrible. And actually, the unemployment rate ticked down a little bit, but not for the reasons people would think, because there's so many Americans that are so down on their luck, so despondent, so frustrated, they have just left the workforce altogether. And so it's unbelievable in America. 2012, we found ourselves in this position. Of course, I watched simultaneously as these numbers were being prepared, parts of the Democratic National Convention. I heard all the speeches to the degree that I had time to watch, the soaring rhetoric, the poetry, if you will. And I thought, my goodness, these people must be living on some alternative universe because the country is not improving, not going forward. Talk to the folks that live here in New Jersey. Some are doing well, but they're nervous about continuing to do well, and their heart bleeds for their friends and their neighbors and people in their families who are not doing as well. And so that's why we got to get things going.
Now, I'm sure our readers are aware. It's been in the paper in the past that you said, at least at one time, that you were amenable to the idea of raising some taxes. So I was wondering which ones and why. It's a two-part question. If you thought this was a break with traditional conservatism, and if it is, why is this needed?
Well, I never have said that I'm open to raising taxes. And certain headline writers, took some liberties with what I believe. What I believe is, frankly, I think what Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan also believe, and that is we got to lower our tax rate, flatten the tax code, and deal with certain deductions, loopholes, and the like, in order to finance the rate decreases and make the tax code more predictable, easier to live by, so companies don't have to hire an army of accountants and corporate tax people, and bring about some fairness as well, because some of these loopholes for not the top 1%, but for the top 1.1 or 0.2% of the 1%, really, are not right. And so that's what I believe, and that's what I've said, and that's what I think we need to do. I don't necessarily subscribe to everything that the Simpson-Bowles Commission has outlined, but I do think we need a Simpson-Bowles style methodology to deal with the debt crisis, to deal with our economy, to get jobs motivated again, and that means we're going to have to cut spending, deal with our entitlement challenges, and raise revenue through pro-growth policies. And so that's what I've said. And of course I named a loophole or so that I thought wasn't quite right. So people can say, oh, well, those are tax increases. I've never voted for a tax increase my whole tenure in the legislature, and I've voted to reduce taxes all along the way. Now, the second part of your question to me relates to the tax pledge, and I don't sign pledges, and it's true, I didn't sign this no tax pledge document. Most Republicans do, and I don't intend to go raise taxes because that's not been my record and my style. There doesn't have to be any mystery about what I would do. You just have to look and see how I've conducted myself as a state senator. But as we get into the really tough part of balancing our budget, of dealing with our deficits, of getting the economy going again, there are going to be some deductions, some loopholes that are going to have to change. And I don't have a crystal ball, and we've got to work with the rest of Congress. We've got to work with whoever the president is. And so, I'm not prepared to be specific over all that has to get done. And, of course, it doesn't get done in one fell swoop. You do it over the fullness of time. But I don't need, and nor do I want, anything that binds me beyond my judgment, beyond my oath of office to the Constitution of the state and, of course, the Constitution of the United States.
Very good. So I was just wondering, going back in time again, do you think that the country, or what do you think, that, if anything, the country could learn from past recessions?
Well, listen, there's always a lot to learn. Hindsight is always 20/20.
That's true.
But I know some basic fundamentals that most people in Washington, don't appreciate, don't seem to understand, is that you don't tax your way through a recession. You don't spend your way through a recession. If that was the case, of course, we'd be in a much, much better position today. And so we got ideologues like Bob Menendez, never meant a tax they didn't like, never meant a spending situation that they didn't embrace, have a fundamental hostility to the private sector, thinks it's our birthright for good private sector jobs to be there. But you know what? The private sector is populated by human beings, by people with natural instincts over where to go, where to be, where to relocate around the region. If you're a state senator worried about producing a strong local economy, or around the world, if you're a United States senator trying to make sure that our American economy continues to be the leading economy in the world as we have been. And so when you have leaders who vote for Obamacare, as my opponent has, vote for big expensive stimulus programs, frankly, that don't build in the main bridges and roads and infrastructure that will last for the next 30 years or a half century, but just for Band-Aids for local and state governments to get them past one budget. When you got ideologues like Bob Menendez who don't yell and scream about the crisis of the country economically in terms of our fiscal challenges, who don't go crazy about the fact that the Senate hasn't passed a budget at all, let alone vote yes or no, hasn't put up a budget at all in 3 years. When you got ideologues like that, do-nothing senators, that have no sense of outrage and no seeming ability to work with colleagues, Republicans and Democrats alike, because if they're there, that's what your job is to do, in my opinion. That's what we do in New Jersey. That's what Governor Christie and reformers do here at home. When you got guys like that, it's no wonder we can't get out of a recession. We may not be in a technical recession right now, but for most Americans, it sure feels that way. And if we head off the fiscal cliff soon with tax increases and spending cuts that are not well thought out in the defense arena, well, the Congressional Budget Office itself has already said, and there's a lot of other smarter economists that exist besides the ones there, said we'll head back into another recession.
Wow. Well, we hear a lot, I'm sure you've heard in your life as well, from political leaders about the need to cut government programs, lower spending, and fix regulation. So what particular programs would you reform, and what regulations do you think get in the way of growing businesses and growing employment?
Well, look, there's so much that needs to be done. The number one thing on everybody's mind in America are jobs, and any regulation that gets in the way of an entrepreneur, small business person, big business people. When we got unusual, unnatural regulatory burdens, needs to be dealt with. We got Dodd-Frank. That's an overreaction to the fiscal crisis that we lived through, to Wall Street excesses, and there ought to be oversight, and there ought to be some curbs in place. But we got a situation now where banks are not lending, people can't get capital, small business guys can't deal with cash flow problems, people can't even refinance their homes. We have historically low interest rates. People can save money every month, stay in their homes, put more money in their pockets so they can save for college, so they can go to the store, buy things they need for their kids. But they can't refinance their houses because the banks have made it so hard. And so, that's one big program of recent times that this Congress has done that we need to change. And we got all kinds of regulations coming with Obamacare, as we know. We could spend a whole half hour on it alone.
Absolutely. Regarding something I've heard you mention in terms of American energy independence, in light of the growing chorus against natural gas, which is someone that lives in Hudson County with Jersey City right next to me, I hear almost every day about protests against a pipeline to bring natural gas into the area. In light of the fact that, from what I understand, it already takes 15 years of paperwork, essentially, to build a nuclear power plant, and also considering the no-go that the President issued on the Keystone oil pipeline from Canada, what do you think are the steps we need to take to increase domestic energy production?
Well, listen, Josh, you're right that America is blessed with a seeming abundance of natural gas. So we got to find it. We've got to harvest it. We've got to transport it to where people live and where it can be used. We got to be smart and sensible about that. We've got to be mindful of the environment, obviously. We also have to be mindful of our economy. And we've got to be wide-eyed about the fact that solar energy and wind energy and other renewable energy alone can't fuel our economy and won't fuel the society. We need to encourage investment in motor vehicles, big trucks and buses that have the physical capacity to run on natural gas in the way that individual smaller cars can't. And obviously, when we have a project that's completely teed up, ready to go, like the Keystone Pipeline, it's unconscionable to vote no. My opponent voted no. I'm going to vote yes. And so that to me is a no-brainer.
And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you something about international affairs. And in light of the storming of our embassy in Egypt the other day, which fortunately, they just replaced the American flag with an Islamic flag, and instead of going further like they did with our ambassador at the consulate in Benghazi in Libya. What are your thoughts on the world around us, both in the Middle East and Russia and China and all the countries that seem to or all the, not just countries, but movements and organizations that like to sort of stick a needle in the American eye, so to speak?
Well, listen, we're living in a very, very dangerous time and dangerous world, and there's a lot of turbulence, to say the least. And America's been the leader in the world now, the last half century. It's been an American order, politically, culturally, economically, militarily, and we got to ensure that stays that way. And I'm fearing, and my fears, unfortunately, I think are founded that we're slipping. And that's why we need to change this this November. And the world craves strong American leadership. And amongst the business leaders that I talk to that do business overseas with other senior business people around the world, when I talk to Governor Christie on his conversations with people like the British Prime Minister or the Israeli Prime Minister and others, when I talk to Governor Romney about what he hears from leaders around the world, I know that people don't believe we're providing the kind of leadership and commanding the respect that America needs to and deserves. And that's a real problem. You know, there used to be a time when, you know, the world admired and had great affection for America, even in the trouble spots of today in the Middle East and elsewhere. And if then, for whatever reason, they didn't like us, they respected us. They certainly feared us. That doesn't seem to exist any longer. And so I'm outraged by this killing of our diplomat and American ambassador doing his job, representing our country. I'm tired of people apologizing for America, a great and generous nation that has sought to bring peace and stability to the world, that has sought to bring comfort and food and material to people that need it all around the world. I'm concerned about a situation where madmen in Iran can have a nuclear weapon, that certain people, certain senators, certain presidents have some mistaken notion that the ongoing sanctions are working just fine. Obviously, something's not right. They're not working just fine. And there seems to be a march toward what America and the world fears the most. I'm stunned, frankly, that the Israeli Prime Minister was in New York this week at the UN, an Amtrak train ride away from Washington, requested a meeting with the President, and he said no. At this very sensitive time with Iran and the problems there that Israel and all sane people in the world are rightly more than concerned about, and our embassy being stormed, an ambassador getting killed, and riots in Egypt, and the president says no. And so I made my feelings known about that decision. I don't think my opponent, has said very much.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Senator. It is always a pleasure to speak with you, and I know it's been very informative for our readership, or rather our listeners, and I hope to have you on sometime in the future when you are our next senator from the great state of New Jersey.
Well, Josh, thank you very much. The campaign is going well. In some ways, it's just starting, and I appreciate all the readers and the viewers of Save New Jersey, the feedback I get from them, and we'll talk to you very, very soon, I hope.